I will now start with our agenda. So, information, there will be a live stream. We're going to be using Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram and YouTube. Video on demand will also be available after the conference. If you would like to speak, then please use your cards. You'll find them in the files, the conference folders that you have before you. Please also include your member state and which parliamentary house you represent. And you can give your cards to the colleague that was waving at you there from the back at the desk on the left-hand side. So, unfortunately, Michel Barnier is unable to come today, but I would like to thank him at this point. That I would like to thank his representative who's going to be here today.
Let us now proceed to the adoption of the agenda for this COSAC meeting. A draft program of our meeting has already been distributed to you. Let me now open the floor for short comments, if there are any. I cannot see any. If there are no comments, then the agenda of the 60th meeting of COSAC can be considered as approved. Yes, thank you. So it is approved. Let us now move to the next agenda item, which is procedural issues and miscellaneous matters. First, I would like to brief you on the results of yesterday's Troika meeting. I'm very pleased to inform you that the Troika agreed to compromise text of the draft contributions of the 16th COSAC as well as the draft conclusions, both of which have been sent to you. You will also find printed copies on the tables inside the hall. In case a delegation does not agree with the compromise text proposed by the Troika and wishes to resubmit its amendments in the original version, the delegation is asked to resubmit such amendments again, following the established procedure. For the Troika compromise texts where the amendments are not resubmitted, we shall consider that consensus is reached. You can submit your written amendments in English or French by noon, 12 o'clock today. Please send them to the Presidency using the email address amendments@COSAC Parlament GV@AT with a copy to the COSAC Secretariat. Please refer to the formatting instructions previously given to you. Moving on to the next item, I would like to welcome Mr. Kenneth Kurmi, the permanent member of the COSAC Secretariat, who will present the 30th biannual report of COSAC. Mr. Kurmi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The 30th biannual report of COSAC was split in 3 chapters. The first chapter, on the role of national parliaments in ensuring transparency and bringing the EU closer to citizens, assessed how parliaments engaged with their citizens to ensure their participation in democratic institutions and national and European elections. From the report, it transpires that in the case of most parliaments or chambers, citizens can both follow plenary meetings online as well as attending them in person. Fewer parliaments, however, provided the same possibility when it came to committee sittings. Nevertheless, a great number of parliaments and chambers provided full or partial written verbatim reports of plenary and committee meetings. Citizens could also make use of other channels to keep themselves informed, including social media channels or by visiting the Parliament's website. Participation by civil society organizations was, however, lacking with regard to plenary meetings. On the other hand, half of the respondents assured and noted that these organizations took part regularly in committee sittings. Transparency was the subject of ongoing debate in most parliaments and chambers, with most parliaments and chambers, however, having not planned any special initiatives related to the European elections in 2019. The first chapter also dealt with the report of the task force on subsidiarity, proportionality and doing less more efficiently, something that had been debated by the majority of parliaments and chambers. Most respondents were also in favour of the continuation of the task force, with only 8 respondents stating that there were already enough existing formats. 22 respondents were of the opinion that the Commission should regularly exchange views with members of the national and regional parliaments or chambers, while 3 respondents sought the participation of the European Parliament. The second chapter of the report dealt with climate policy and energy union, where it transpired that the most popular topics with parliaments were the climate package, the clean energy package, the circular economy, clean power for transport, and national environmental and energy policies. There was noticeable convergence when it came to attaching a level of importance to the 5 dimensions, with most of them considering them to be either very important or important, and none considered to not be important at all. While the majority of parliaments were in favour of more coordination and interaction of member states' climate and energy policies at EU level, most were against full harmonisation in this area. The third and final chapter focused on the state of play of Brexit, a topic debated by almost all parliaments and chambers. While most parliaments noted that they had regular access to the documents concerning the withdrawal, a majority had not yet examined the European Commission draft agreement on the withdrawal of the UK from the EU. On the flip side, most had indeed discussed the impact assessment of post-Brexit scenarios on their economies. With regard to the question of continuing to invite the UK to interparliamentary formats such as COSAC, 25 respondents answered positively, though 16 of these qualified this by saying that it should be done under certain conditions. 15 respondents expressed no opinion. Only 4 respondents were in favour of amending the rules of procedure of COSAC so that it would allow countries outside of the EU to regularly attend meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kurmi, and let me also thank the COSAC Secretariat for their hard work in compiling the report. I think that we have succeeded in our ambition for the 30th biannual report to be above all well-structured and sufficiently focused. I also found it very informative, and as previously discussed, we should all try to promote it as an expression of interparliamentary cooperation. Third, now, letters received by the Presidency. We have received letters from the parliaments of Georgia, Andorra, Monaco and Ukraine regarding participation at the COSAC as observers and special guests. The same applies for the parliaments of Norway, Iceland and Switzerland, who already presented this request before the chairperson's meeting in July for both COSAC meetings. Based on the rules of procedure and after consulting with the Troika, the Presidency is glad to welcome them in Vienna, with the exception of Georgia, who is not able to attend due to elections. Let me draw special attention to the request of Kosovo to participate in order to make the participation possible while complying with international regulations. Written documents are featured Kosovo with the asterisk and footnote in the first time Kosovo is referred to. In that regard, let me draw your attention to the letter of our Romanian colleagues in the Troika that made reference to this issue. The next letter which I want to mention is the one from the Walloon Parliament aimed at modifying the composition of the Belgian delegation within COSAC. The Austrian chair replied in a letter of 20th July that it is not the role of COSAC to enter into discussions on constitutional or representational arrangements of a member state. Now we come to the letter of our Troika member Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria of 27th September, submitting a proposal for the revision of COSAC rules of procedure, including a new paragraph 3.2a, by which 2 members of the parliament of each EU potential candidate country, EFTA country, or Eastern Partnership country shall be invited as observers. We have received 2 reactions to this proposal, one from Cyprus and a common letter from the French National Assembly and the German Bundestag, declaring their reservations to an amendment of the rules of procedure. I may ask Mr. Vigenin now to explain his proposal to us, which has already been distributed to delegations and which has to be dealt with this COSAC meeting. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, during the Bulgarian presidency, we have received a letter from the parliaments of Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, in which they actually ask us to arrange, to change the arrangement and to allow them to, on a permanent basis, to participate in our COSAC meetings. It was too late to initiate changes in the rules of procedure then, and I've mentioned during the COSAC plenary meeting in Sofia that I'll take the necessary steps during the Austrian presidency. So taking into account that we should not treat less favorably potential candidate countries or EFTA countries, which have a long tradition in participating in our meetings, I have submitted the respective proposal to amend the rules of procedure. Since there was no unanimous support needed to amend the procedures, the rules of procedures, I have decided to withdraw this amendment for the moment, and I have asked yesterday during the Troika meeting that the next presidency should deal with this issue so as to allow these countries, these parliaments, which are committed to our work, to be invited on a permanent basis, and the exact wording and exact procedure should be defined by one of the next presidencies. Really, I believe that we should change our approach, and if we cannot do it this time, we should soon come back to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. We take note that you have just withdrawn it, so we do not need to discuss it further on in this meeting. Next is the letter from the Estonian Parliament of 17th October, providing some suggestions for the draft contribution. As the elaboration of our contributions and conclusions have to follow the procedure laid down in the COSAC rules of procedure, we could not take them into consideration at that stage. Next, on 8th October 2018, a meeting of the committees of the EU affairs of the Parliament of the Visegrad countries took place in Prague. The Czech Senate was kindly shared with us the conclusions adopted during their meeting. And finally, the chairpersons of the EU committees of the Dutch and Danish Parliament asked the Parliament asked the chair to provide delegations with an update on transparency, referring to the letter that was co-signed by representatives of 26 chambers in December 2017. I presume it will be mentioned during the debate of session 4 of tomorrow's meeting. Dear colleagues, do you have any comments on these procedural matters? Okay. Yeah. Sorry? There was no translation? Oh. Sorry. This is a pity. Okay. Yeah, we try to solve this problem with the translation. Sorry, dear colleagues, now it works again, they said? Does it work, the translation? Yeah? Okay. So, are there any comments on these procedural matters? No. Thank you, colleagues. Now we can move to the first session. Stand des österreichischen EU-Ratsvorsitzes. Die erste Session ist diesem Thema gewidmet.
Is to the state of play with the Austrian Presidency, and I ask Ms. Carolina Edstadler to take the floor, and she has an important position in the Presidency, so she will give you an overview. I have more than 30 people who would like to speak. So I ask you all to keep to the 2 minutes, because longer speaking times will unfortunately not be possible. So please, Secretary of State, go ahead. So, chairs of COSAC, Mr. Labatka, Mr. Buchmann, representatives of the European Parliaments, so a very warm welcome here in Vienna, also from my side. It's winter has come to greet us, So I hope that you'll also be able to see the Christmas markets here in Vienna. So we're already in a Christmassy kind of mood. So, and Christmas will also be the end of our presidency. So, on the 9th of July, there was the COSAC meeting here, and I was able to talk about the priorities of the Austrian presidency. Today, it's about talking about how things have run up until now and to discuss what's happened so far. At the moment, it's been mentioned already, the Brexit negotiations are at the centre of the important issues. So the Council has been meeting in Brussels since 9 o'clock this morning, and also then, of course, the European Council next Sunday. So this topic is going to continue to concern us over the next days and weeks, and we hope very much that we will be able to reach an agreement with Great Britain, and we will be able to avoid a hard Brexit. Nobody wants that. We hope that we'll be able to avoid that. Austria is supporting wholeheartedly the work of Michel Barnier, and let me say that he and his entire team have really carried out excellent work. It must be an important objective for all of us that we want to maintain the unity of the 27 states in the same way as it's absolutely essential that it continues for the final stretch of these negotiations. So Brexit has been dominating the agenda, but of course the presidency has been working on all of our other priorities. The motto for our presidency has been a Europe that protects. And I would like to explain what the most important issues here are: security and the fight against illegal migration, prosperity and the completion of the digital single market. There's also the West Balkan states. In Southeast Europe, we want to make sure that there is stability there, but also the multi-annual financial framework for after 2020 and subsidiarity. All of these areas where we have that we are focusing on, and we've been able to make good progress in all of them. So in the area of security and the fight against illegal migration, there was the informal summit in Salzburg in the middle of October. And the June meeting. So the focus here has been to have an effective protection of the external borders, and this is important to have a functioning migration policy. Bundeskanzler Sebastian Kurz has talked about the very far-reaching work that the Austrian presidency has taken on in this area. So we've been looking at the legislation and working very intensively on the legislation for the common European asylum policy. And the Dublin regulation, of course. So since July, we've been working very intensively on new approaches and on new options for moving forward on this. In summer, we had bilateral discussions with all of the member states. Unfortunately, it made it clear that there is no consensus at the moment for an allocation system. So, and that was also confirmed in the summit. What we need here is to have balance between responsibility and solidarity. Only in this way can we be successful in reaching a consensus. The Austrian presidency has therefore redoubled its efforts, and we have agreed to try to have a tour of the capitals at expert levels in order to try and look for scope for consensus in the capitals. Some agreement was there, however, that effective protection of our external EU borders must be ensured. The European Commission therefore has been working very strongly on strengthening the Coast Guard and Border Protection Frontex. So there is a need for this, and we hope that we will be able to reach at least a partial agreement in this field by the end of the year. Other dossiers are the proposal from the Commission for repatriation and a European Asylum Agency. The external aspects were discussed in Salzburg and in the European Council in October. This is to do with deepening our cooperation with Egypt and other North African countries, not just for asylum, but for other issues as well, as had been proposed by Jean-Claude Juncker. Bundeskanzler Kurz and Donald Tusk met in September. They met with the Egyptian presidents in Cairo and also in New York in order to intensify this cooperation. There was an agreement reached on having a summit between the EU and the Arab League, and that would be in February 2019. In addition to this, Austria will have a high-level conference on Africa and Europe that will be in December here in Vienna, with the title Taking Cooperation to the Digital Age. With this, we want to make a contribution to build a bridge between the two continents in order to create a basis for closer cooperation that will cover much more than simply security issues. With regard to internal security, we hope to complete dossiers which are at the moment being negotiated by the European Parliament, for example, legislation for cyber security, for interoperability between EU databases, the European Criminal Record Information System, ECRIS, and also for electronic proof and evidence. So we are focused on maintaining prosperity and completing the single digital market. In order to strengthen the position of the EU at a global level, we have to carry out reforms to improve our competitiveness. In the last weeks, we were able to put forward some clear proposals, and informally they have been agreed upon. So, for example, for the movement of data, and the directive for making audiovisual material available. In the informal meeting of the finance ministers in September in Vienna, they discussed digital taxation, and so they discussed these topics, and certainly an approach. It was possible to bring the various positions on this issue closer together. The discussions will be continued intensively, and we hope that by the end of the year we will also have tangible achievements. There was also ECOFIN work on various dossiers for modernizing the tax systems within the EU, and also in the battle against VAT fraud. Ensuring prosperity includes ensuring that we protect our environment and people's health. The Environmental Council, at the beginning of October, had some very difficult negotiations, but they were able to agree on emissions for vehicles, passenger vehicles. And the discussions with the EP started, with the European Parliament started on the very next day. The Environmental Council also managed to put together a strong position for COP24 in Katowice. This is a further strong signal that the EU will continue to be a global pioneer on environmental issues, and that the member states are prepared to follow very ambitious targets. Also, for workers, in the discussion with the European Parliament, there was further discussion on two directives, one to do in work. Wolfgang Sobotka has already touched upon the Balkan states and what an important issue they are for Europe. In this area, we have continued to work on bringing this region closer to the European Union. This is significant for political stability and for positive economic development. We hope that under the Austrian Presidency we will continue to open negotiation chapters with Serbia and Montenegro, and that we will be able to close chapters as well. I welcome the voting in October in Skopje and the efforts being made to deal with the controversy over the name between Macedonia and Greece. So it's important, this is an important contribution to reducing the differences between countries in this region. Bundeskanzler Sebastian Kurz was in Serbia at the beginning of November and in Kosovo. Our European Minister Gernot Blümel and myself, we were also in the region. And that brings me to a topic which has been of absolute priority since the beginning of our presidency, and I'm talking about the multi-annual financial framework. So, at the working group level, since July, there has been meetings every week, except in August. And in the COREPER, there has also been discussions taking place, and also at a ministerial level. This has been discussed at every meeting. In November, on the 12th, this was also the case. Through these very intensive negotiations, we've been able to make very good progress, and in December, we will be able to put forward a report which will include the complete negotiations. I've also been to Brussels, involved in many of the discussions, discussing with the experts and also the heads of the committees for budget, so that I can assure you that the experts are working very professionally at all levels. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to my last point, that on subsidiarity. Strengthening the principle of subsidiarity is, as you know, a very important issue for the Austrian presidency. We want a European Union which is strong on the big questions, but holds back on the issues which are better resolved at a member state level. With the subsidiarity conference last week in Bregenz, the presidency has set the stage for better implementation of this very important principle. The work of the task force and VP Franz Timmermans was presented to us, and we support it, and also from October in 2018. So the role of the national parliaments in practice has to be strengthened, and we need to have better involvement of the regional parliaments as well, and also more transparency in terms of legislation for the citizens. These will continue to be the important points for discussion in Bregenz. At the end of the conference, there was also a declaration, the Bregenz Declaration, and we will work hard to ensure that these elements are also involved in the future discussions on the European Union and the future of the European Union. So, ladies and gentlemen, working well together in terms of the national parliaments and the European Parliament, this is a decisive factor in order to have sustainable progress and achievements. The presidency is an important partner in that. So, with an eye on the European Parliament elections, which will remain next year, it must be clear to us that our citizens expect to see progress and to see clear results. And for the citizens, they're not really so interested in who does what. What's important for them is that their concerns are taken seriously and that they see that the European Parliament is effective on the big issues. And that is what we all will be judged by over the next 6 months. And so we have to continue here to work together to find the best solutions and to reach the best decisions. So I'm very happy to be here, and I will be staying here today. And so I wish you very lively discussions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam State Secretary, for this introduction. That brings us to the discussion. As I said before the statement, you have 2 minutes per person because we have 34 requests for the floor, and then in addition to that, at the end, we'll have 2 demands for the floor for the procedure. So, the first request for the floor is from Cyprus. Georgios.
Please.
President.
Στο μέσο μιας διαδικασίας της παγκοσμιοποίησης που μας επιτρέπει να πούμε ότι
we're seeing that we have this procedure of globalization at the moment. Given this procedure, we could perfectly well say that we have become a global village. And I think that in this context, one should be able to feel safe and protected.
Από τις θάλασσες της Ανατολικής Μεσογείου, εκεί όπου οι άνθρωποι
we are coming from the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and there people are living in an extremely difficult situation. We have families, mothers and children who die when they're trying to cross the sea. We find dead children at our beaches. And we also have quite a number of young people, children, who arrive without their parents, and that's happening practically all the time. Therefore, we think that Europe really does have to look at this subject. We will have to deal with it. We will have to try and find a solution on the basis of our principles and values. The question is whether Europe wants this. Thank you for your comment. Next comment, please.
Hungary.
From Hungary.
Dear Ms. Secretary, dear colleagues, I'm happy to be here again in Vienna in the days when we commemorate the 100 years anniversary of the end of the Great War. Following the bloody war, the map of Europe changed radically, but one important mission hasn't been completed ever since: the Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans countries to the European family. This represents not just our historical duty, but political and cultural and economic interest as well. I thank deeply for the Austrian Presidency to keep this issue high on the European agenda. Dear colleagues, the peace in Europe goes hand in hand with the security of our countries and peoples. I wish to express my support for the Presidency to tackle the migration crisis with a holistic approach, focusing on the need of effective border protection. I also want to stress, Mr. Chairman, that Hungary cannot accept any obligatory relocation mechanism and cannot recognize the right to migration as a human right. There is a clear distinction to be made between real asylum seekers and simple economic migrants. It is my honor to reinforce that with our Visegrad partners, we stay on this particular issue united. Before closing, Mr. Chairman, let me emphasize that I do not find it urgent to close the MFF negotiations ahead of European Parliament elections in May. On my opinion, first and fair Brexit, the withdrawal agreement ratified by all relevant parties is required. Then we cannot continue our discussion on the future budget. As I'm still in Vienna, let me know that I find internal Schengen border controls unnecessary, in particular in the Hungarian-Austrian border sections. I hope to find a viable solution to this issue in the near future. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank auch für die Zeitdisziplin.
Thank you, and thank you for having stayed within your time allotted to you. Next comment from Sweden.
Herzlichen Dank. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I very much appreciate this opportunity to speak on the topic of small and large challenges. It's very important in European cooperation that we continue to strive towards improving our cooperation even further and having good relations with the surrounding countries, not least, as some of our colleagues emphasized, the importance of dealing with the major migratory challenge that we are faced with. I and Sweden feel that we need to have a solution which is focused on common solutions to a greater extent. We cannot simply have a situation where individual countries alone deal with these challenges. As we've seen in the background documents, we have a strong economy. We're an important commercial partner, but unfortunately we are losing some of our financial and economic impact. So to a greater extent, we feel that we need to look at how we can strengthen our competitiveness within the EU. The digital economy is extremely essential as a component in that context. And I'd like to say a few words about why the Swedish delegation is opposed to the proposals on a digital tax. A digital tax, as we see it from the Swedish perspective, is something which brings with it inherent risks. It would counteract digitization as a whole. We need more of it, not less. To begin with, the way the tax is discussed currently also brings a new taxation logic in it. It is the turnover which will be taxed. And for smaller countries with a lot of exports, that would mean that the tax base would shrink. But the most serious point of all would be that innovation would potentially grind to a halt. When you take this particular approach, it would be difficult for small startup companies to operate. I think we need more startups and a growing digital economy in Europe. Thank you for your attention, Chair.
Thank you for your comment. Next comment, please.
Mikro.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Kiitos Itävallalle kutsusta tulla kauniiseen Wieniin. On tärkeää, että me parlamentaarikot saamme tämän tilaisuuden
invite us to the beautiful town of Vienna. Now we are discussing very important issues. I want to underline the global compact for migration under the United Nations, which is to be signed in Marrakesh next month. I have to admit that I'm very disappointed that Austria, as a presidency of the Council, is not ready to sign this compact. Finland, the Finnish government, and the opposition, Social Democrats, as myself, we are in favor of this compact, as is our government. It is unfortunate that there is a lot of disinformation around this compact and also fake news, which people and governments seem to believe. We have to say that there is no migration crisis in Europe. There's a political crisis where the debate on migration is used for your own purposes. We need to say very clearly that there are no illegal asylum seekers. There is always a legal way and legal right to seek for asylum. We want to have a multilateral lawful system, which is the one under the United Nations. And therefore this compact, global compact, is a sign of global possibility of multilateral cooperation. Thank you very much.
Next, Portugal, please.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente. Uma primeira palavra para saudar a presidência austríaca da União Europeia.
Very much, Chairman. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Austrian Presidency and congratulate them thank them because of the very warm welcome that they've given us for this COSAC meeting and congratulating them on their work. And I'd also like to congratulate the State Secretary and point out one thing straight away. The motto that you have chosen is really very consensual, and it is very much what we need now, namely a Europe that protects, and a Europe that increases the trust and confidence of citizens in this Europe. We have a history, we have values, we have a history of peace, we have solidarity, we have prosperity, social justice, and these are the things that we have to make clear and strengthen, especially such a short time before the European elections. We all know that we have many problems in Europe at the moment. We have the refugee crisis and the refugee flows, and we have to find joint answers to this, all of us together in a responsible way and in an international context. This is a new situation for us. We have very special transatlantic positions. We have populism, which is increasing, unfortunately, at the moment, which is why we have to really be extremely courageous and find the right answers for our citizens and fight against this movement. We have the risks of excluding people. We have to protect our data. The Austrian Presidency has managed two very important points, Brexit and the multi-annual financial framework. And we have to say that as far as we are concerned, the starting point given by the Commission is something we cannot agree to. It's not viable as far as we are concerned. That goes both for the cohesion policy and for the GAP, and that is why we would like this proposal to be improved. Again, thank you very much to the Austrian Presidency.
Thank you. The next is
thank you.
Abgeordneter Peter Boschun aus Slowenien.
Peter Boschun from Slovenia is next.
Peter Boschun, Slovenia.
Predsednik in gostoljubje, spoštovane gospe in gospodje.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this very warm welcome. In the State Council of our Republic, we are very much in favor of the priorities of the Austrian Presidency, and especially of digitalisation. This also goes for a further improvement of the health situation in Europe. Given the good experience we have made at home, we would like to have more money going into the digitalization of the health systems as well, so that we have a better quality of the health system, which would be very much in favor of our patients. We need to really study this, to look into it much more closely. And then there was a declaration signed which says that the genome research should be increased by 2019. We also need more protection as far as better personalized medicine is concerned, and the same goes for research into more rare diseases. We know that due to technical difficulties, only a very small part of digital infrastructure can be really adapted to this as far as health is concerned, and only there can we have a very high value exchange of data, which is why interoperability is so important, because that way we can use the data in a focused way for improving the health of our people. Given the nature of the health data, which of course are extremely interesting to research, science and also industry, we have to make sure to find solutions where a very high protection of the personal data is guaranteed. And these are data both in the national institutes and in other organizations that carry out research here. And the same is true, of course, for the exchange of data. This has to be done under very well-controlled situations. And obviously, data protection has to be borne in mind there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next comment, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming from Albania, I can only thank the Austrian Presidency for focusing apart from migration challenges and proper control of the outer union borders, Brexit, also on enlargement. In the wake of the Bulgarian presidency, Austria kept a tight focus on the enlargement of the Western Balkans, and I hope this will further continue next year under the Armenian presidency, and opening of the accession negotiations with Macedonia and Albania will be made possible. As we heard from Speaker Wolfgang Sobotka, today there are third-party powers keen to set a foothold on the Balkans, powers that are not necessarily friendly to the Euro-Atlantic perspective of Southeastern Europe. There are many instruments at hand to set limits to undesirable intrusion that need to be effectively used, primarily by the Commission, apart from the Balkan countries themselves, of course. But to advance towards Union membership, we heard there are no accession light, there are established criteria to fulfill, starting with the rule of law. To do so will benefit the peoples in the region first, but also, obviously, the European integration process. The Commission Western Balkan strategy presented in February this year rightly places the accent to organized criminality and their links to power politicians. It remains only to speak up publicly and specifically and to act upon it. Thank you.
Vielen Dank für die Wortmeldung.
Yes, thank you very much for that comment. Jean Bizet from France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Votre pays a pris la présidence de l'Union européenne dans un contexte particulièrement
difficile. You take the presidency when Europe's in a particularly different context, and the EU has to pick up a particularly difficult challenge, and Brexit's not the least of these. Let me underscore 3 points. As regards the management of the Schengen area, now that's a matter which excites our populations. Our population is very impatient. Everyone had understood that no member state on its own could face up to problems. And the EU is called upon to protect its borders, and I'm pleased precisely that the Frontex budget, that its multi-annual budget, has been virtually tripled. Finally, as regards competitiveness through developing digitalisation, I think it's important to underscore that the EU must not simply be a consumer. It must also be an actor and develop an industrial strategy which presupposes evolution of the EU's competition policy, which also means we must be able to give the EU some supercomputers, things which we miss at the moment. China and the United States will not wait for us. As regards the policy for the Western Balkans, well, two alternatives would be put there, and if we turn down, we risk the stability of those countries, which tomorrow will be under the influence in particular of our neighbour Russia, or make them into economic actors, which means precisely that we need them to respect EU values. Finally, we began some discussions about the next multi-annual financial framework. Well, we need to try and have some conclusion before the next elections. And let's not forget that the two policies, the common agricultural policy and the cohesion fund policies, are both strategic and policies and ones which express essential solidarity for the Union. Thank you. The next MP is Kriechbaum, please, from Germany.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Von unserer Seite auch erst einmal ein herzliches Dankeschön.
And a warm
Zum
thanks from
einen
us
für
to
die
begin with
Ausrichtung des gestrigen Abends.
for organising
sehr wohlgefühlt,
last
aber
night.
auch, was die
On the
gesamte
one hand, we
Präsidentschaft
felt
angeht. Ich
very
glaube,
much at our ease, but
gerade
also
hier
for
ist sehr
organising
viel
the
gelungen in
presidency.
puncto
We
Migration
think
in
much
Sachen westlicher
has been
Balkan
successful when it
und
comes
vor
to
allem auch in
migration in the
Sachen
Western
der
Balkans, and
Digitalisierung.
also when it
Ich
comes to
widerspreche meinem Freund
digitalization.
und
I
Kollegen
would
Richard
contradict
Hortzik
my
nur
friend,
ungern,
or at least
was
I
die
don't like
Planung
contradicting
zum
Richard
mehrjährigen
Hortzik
Finanzrahmen
as regards
angeht.
the
Ganz im
planning for
Gegenteil,
the
ich glaube, es ist
MAFF.
wichtig,
But
dass wir jetzt
I think it's
die Zeit
important
nutzen
that we
bis
now
zur Wahl des
use the time
Europäischen Parlaments,
until
denn ich
the
glaube, es wird sich so
European
mancher noch
elections,
wundern, wie die
because some, I
Zusammensetzung
think,
des
might be
nächsten Europäischen
amazed
Parlaments aussehen wird.
at
Und ich glaube, die Dinge
composition
werden
of the
nicht
future
einfacher.
European Parliament, and
Fakt
things
ist
will
doch,
not become
dass den
easier through
Beteiligten
that. The
hier der
fact
Mut
is
fehlt. Denn
that
es
those
gibt doch nur
involved
zwei
here
Szenarien.
lack the
Großbritannien
necessary
verlässt die
courage. Two
Europäische
scenarios.
Union oder es bleibt in
The
der
UK
Europäischen
leaves the
Union.
EU or it
Also an
stays
letzteres
inside.
glaube ich persönlich jedenfalls nicht.
I don't
Und das
believe
heißt, wir
the
werden
latter,
eine
not
Deckungslücke
personally.
haben von
So
12
we're going
bis
to
14
lack
Milliarden
12
Euro
to
jährlich.
14 billion euros every year. We'll have to cope with that. And the proposal from Gunther Oettinger, the budgetary commissioner, makes account for this, and will have repercussions for the CAP and the structural fund. Now, if we're honest, no national government has the courage. Do we, as national parliamentarians, have the necessary courage to appear before our own populations and say, you'll have to cope with less? The fact is there will be less money in the kitty in the future, but we need to take the opportunity to set priorities on innovation, digitalisation, just as Estonia does in an exemplary fashion. I think that's the right approach, because value creation is crucial, and that's the way forward. We need to generate, for example, new jobs from that, and those will be the areas we can only develop if we all pull together. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kriechbaum. It's Peter Loix, please.
Dank u wel, voorzitter.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me start by congratulating Austria for the perfect organisation of this COSAC, as well as with the choice of priorities for the Austrian Presidency, a Europe that protects. While security and migration and combating illegal migration are also topics that my political party, NVA, thinks are important. The current discussion about the global compact about migration shows that this is and will remain an important topic indeed. It is clear that Europe does not support this pact with one voice. Austria doesn't support it for one. My party has serious questions related to this Pact of Marrakesh. In Belgium, we are currently legally reviewing this pact with our legal experts. Colleagues, we must not shy away from this debate. We cannot perhaps debate on the substance, but we can at least look at and analyse the possible legal impact of this document. Will it be binding? To what extent? And can this be an impediment for migration policy in future? Migration is viewed from one angle only in the pact. There is no distinction between regular and irregular migration. Okay, the merit is countries have sat together and talked about the topic, and yes, migration needs to be tackled internationally, but a multilateral approach being necessary cannot be an impediment to the legal soundness of the pact. Colleagues, we must enter into this debate.
Thank you. Colleague Rodriguez from Spain. Sorry, from the European Parliament. Sorry.
Indeed, European Parliament. The Austrian Presidency is inspired by the motto, a Europe that protects. And this is needed to close the gap with citizens and to counter nationalistic positions, for sure. Nevertheless, we Social Democrats in the European Parliament, we are worried this is not really being properly implemented. Let me just point out some questions. In face of the digital revolution, a Europe that protects should be based on implementing the social pillar, giving to each citizen a proper labour contract and access to social protection. In face of climate change, we need to develop a strong investment strategy based on cohesion among all European regions. So why is the Austrian Presidency hesitating to deliver on this cohesion means and on delivering a budget for the Eurozone being discussed today? And in face of migration, yes, we know that to have a proper management of migration, we need to have a comprehensive approach. And this is exactly proposed by the Global Compact on Migration. So why is the Austrian Presidency suggesting that we should withdraw our support to this Global Compact? We cannot understand this. So these are my questions.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. Bundesrat Stefan Schenach, Austria. Thank you very much.
Weil alles kann man ja nicht planen, aber den Delegationen, glaube ich, hat der heutige Morgen mit Schnee besonders gut gefallen hier in der Stadt. Frau Staatssekretärin, seit die Delegationen gestern angekommen sind, wird man als Österreicher in der COSAC immer mit einer Frage konfrontiert. Warum hat Österreich diesen Schritt beim UN-Migrationspakt gesetzt?
Why did Austria take that step when it came to the UN Pact? Why did Austria disseminate information which are not true? A CSU MP asked openly, and I'm not an expert, but I know that you are. I know you're active at the European Court of Human Rights, and the colleague from Hungary used the word again, which is originally from Austria, and it's wrong. That's a human right to migration, but it's based on that. That's not true, and it doesn't need to be ratified. Why? Well, that's the question that's been raised time and again. Why does the country which has the presidency, why has it done something which the current Chancellor, then Foreign Minister, welcomed? He said, I support this compact on migration. Those were his words. Maybe you, Secretary of State, as a real expert, could give us some answers to this pressing question, which is hanging in the air, and it's been around here since yesterday evening. Thank you. Next, Lenska, please, from the Netherlands.
Thanks for the floor, and thank you very much for organizing this COSAC meeting. Congratulations on the successful presidency for Austria of the European Union. There are two subjects I want to raise. First question, what do you think you'll be presenting in December, talking about the MFF? Will we really come to the end of the negotiations before the European elections? As far as we're concerned, that is not necessarily the final aim. It would be better also if the populations of Europe decided first what their choice is before we make a final decision on the MFF. Second subject, the subsidiarity test. I've seen that the Austrian presidency has taken the extension from 8 to 12 weeks as a point of support. Our message was to use the Council General Affairs to express that same support, because that's one of the outcomes from the task force, which we, for one, embrace. And I hope that you'll be able to confirm that the Austrian presidency will also support this proposal to go to 12 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next, Anastasio Korakis from Greece.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Πρόεδρε. Σχετικά με την αποτίμηση του έργου της Αυστριακής Προεδρίας, θα έλεγα ότι η δική μας οπτική ως Προεδρείο της Επιτροπής Ευρωπαϊκών Υποθέσεων της Βουλής των Ελλήνων εστιάζει σε δύο από τους στόχους που αυτή έθεσε, στις προτεραιότητες που οριοθέτησε πρώτον για τη μετανάστευση και δεύτερον για τη διαδικασία ευρωπαϊκής ολοκλήρωσης των Δυτικών Βαλκανίων. Ως προς το πρώτο ζήτημα, θα ήθελα να τονίσω ότι η Αυστριακή Προεδρία προσπάθησε να θέσει στο μεταναστευτικό μια ατζέντα συντηρητικών αναφορών με έμφαση στην καταστολή. Δυστυχώς, οι προτεραιότητες αυτές δεν ωφέλησαν στη διαχείριση του προβλήματος, ενώ έδωσαν την ευκαιρία σε χώρες που δεν ενσωματώνουν το ευρωπαϊκό κεκτημένο να αποκλίνουν ακόμη περισσότερο. Όμως υπάρχει και ακόμα ένα στοιχείο το οποίο δεν θα πρέπει να αγνοήσουμε. Η ατζέντα αυτή ευνόησε την ευρωπαϊκή ακροδεξιά και τον συντηρητικό λαϊκισμό, δημιουργώντας ακόμα μεγαλύτερες περιχαρακώσεις στις ευρωπαϊκές κοινωνίες. Ταυτόχρονα όμως διαχείριση του μεταναστευτικού αφέθηκε στις προσπάθειες των χωρών της πρώτης υποδοχής και στο πλαίσιο αυτό τα αποτελέσματα της εργασίας της Αυστριακής Προεδρίας στο θέμα αυτό δεν έδωσαν μια νέα ευρωπαϊκή όθηση στην αντιμετώπιση του προσφυγικού,
left to their own devices. And we see that there has been no progress when it came to the issue of immigration, in particular when it came to respect of human rights. As regards the process for the Western Balkans, we see that some progress has been achieved, particularly when it comes to the, and we would wish for more progress on immigration here. We also saw that there was a solution when it came to solving the issue of the name, and we hope that in the months to come this can be successfully concluded. Thank you for your attention. It's William Cash, please.
Thank you very much indeed.
Hartelijk dank.
I'd just like to first of all thank
Allereerst wil ik graag de Oostenrijkse regering danken voor hun gastvrijheid. Ik vind het jammer dat meneer Barnier er niet bij zal zijn, want ik had graag gedebatteerd met hem over al deze onderwerpen. Goed, op dit ogenblik wil ik gewoon iets vermelden, namelijk het onderwerp subsidiariteit. Met een vraag die ik aan u wil voorleggen. Ik begrijp wat het concept behelst. Maar het probleem is, als je praat over subsidiariteit, moet je beslissen wat nu precies op het hogere niveau zal gesitueerd zijn en wat op het lagere niveau. En het eerste op het hoogste niveau moet de democratie zijn. En daarmee bedoel ik echte democratie. En dan is er ook het vraagstuk identiteit. Ja, en daar komt immigratie ook bij om de hoek kijken. Waarbij ik alleen maar wil zeggen, wij in het VK zijn er uitgestapt middels de stemming van 2016, hoofdzakelijk omdat wij nationale soevereiniteit niet voldoende weerspiegeld zagen in de Europese integratie en het systeem daaromtrent. En we stelden vragen bij het aspect van de democratie. We konden geen respect opbrengen voor de manier waarop we geregeerd werden binnen de Europese Unie en dat is de reden waarom we uitgestapt zijn. En om meneer Kutschbaan van antwoord te dienen, dat is de reden waarom we eruit gestapt zijn.
Thank you.
En dat zal ook zo blijven.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to greet you all on behalf of the Montenegro delegation and to congratulate to our Austrian colleagues on perfect organization of this COSAC. Dear Chairman, we welcome the priorities of the Austrian Presidency, which we consider very important for the stability and global image of both the European Union and its neighbourhood. We are particularly pleased to see that the dedication to the enlargement policy and European perspective of the Western Balkan countries, expressed by both the Bulgarian and now Austrian Presidency, is confirmed in the draft contributions of this COSAC. 2018 has been the year of renewed EU interest and support to our region, which is very important for keeping the accession process alive, not only in the eyes of those leading the reforms, but more importantly, in the eyes of every of our citizens. Montenegro is well aware that EU enlargement is a process based on the respect of core EU values and principles. Our aim is to implement the reforms not only for the sake of joining the EU, but with the objective to provide for better life for our citizens. Therefore, with 31 negotiation chapters open, we are aware that we should invest even more efforts in the field of rule of law and democratization of national institutions, bearing in mind that this could steer the entire accession process and define its speed. At the same time, the truth is that today, we, from the Western Balkans, understand somewhat differently than yesterday the good intent messages of politicians from the EU that the quality of integration process is more important than its speed. Today, we are faced with the fact that announced provisional date of accession is very time further and further away. Meanwhile, we can witness that many standards and principles that we are asked to respect are not respected in many member states. However, even though our progress in different areas can vary, as well as the views of different actors on how to best implement the reforms, we all remain well aware that our most important goal, above all others, is to ensure the respect of main democratic values: rule of law, respect of human rights, economic stability, and promise of secure and sustainable future for our citizens and our children. Thank you for your attention.
Danke.
Thank you. Spain.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Migration is certainly one of the main subjects for the Austrian presidency. We know perfectly well that Austria has to find a response to this, not just for humanitarian reasons and because this is essential for the international community, but also for the values that we have. In these few days, we see that there are internal reflections and internal dimensions there. This phenomenon and this question could certainly lead to major social pressure and other pressures which might imbalance our societies. Spain is trying to find answers there, and we're trying to influence the European policy in this respect. We think that it is an important fact that the Austrian presidency has chosen this subject, but we regret very much that they've decided to withdraw from the UN Pact, because we think that Austria could certainly help in this and should have given an impact to the European Union. We find the internal dimension of migration policy important as well, and we think that since 2015 the number of people who have reached the European Union has decreased substantially due to a number of measures that were taken, including the border controls and the others. The main causes, however, have not been solved, and the African countries have to be helped to measure and to master this challenge. One of the main development plans could help in these countries where education and jobs would be necessary. That would help us fight against immigration. We think that European countries have to help Africa to come up with a policy that makes sure that these people do not come to our countries anymore. Then there's another pillar which can help us, and we have to coordinate the policy between the member states and our neighboring countries in this respect. Last but not least, we have to make sure that we find a proper reply to this phenomenon, and that we can coordinate our national asylum policies. Everything has to be done in order to make sure that we come up with a uniform solution in Europe that can help solve this very important problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco Selin.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor, and thank you very much for the Austrian hospitality, excellent work, and for the organization of this COSAC meeting. When the world is in flames and so many conflicts, the EU has to be standing in solidarity and implement the decisions made for a joint solution to the migration issue. There are dangers in us in forums such as this focus on processes and numbers only, but let's not forget that behind each number, behind each euro, there's death, there's life, individual people and individual faiths. To save lives and provide options to dangerous, hazardous and irregular paths of migration, it is important that we have a Europe that protects. A Europe that protects will do this together. In cooperation, the right of asylum must be safeguarded. Member states, we need jointly to contribute to operational support for Greece and Italy. We need to remain focused on better return options and a better functioning order for people to be able to return. This is essential to have a sustainable European migration system. I want to emphasize that we need to make further efforts to execute the decisions for returning migrants to their original countries, and we need to do this while respecting basic fundamental rights, including the right of asylum. We will safeguard the right to asylum, and within the EU family, we all need to chip in and share this burden of responsibility for the migration policy. Austria, Germany and Sweden cannot alone represent the welcoming of migrants and refugees, rather. And I want to remind you that 160,000 refugees will be redistributed according to the decision made with compulsory redistribution within the EU. We need to stand up for this decision on the mechanism for redistribution. A Europe that protects will protect together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, Portugal, Constanza Urbano de Souza. Thank you, Chair. So first, I would like to thank you for your kind hospitality here in Austria at this conference. I would like to concentrate on migration. The struggle against illegal migration and border controls, these are of course legitimate, but there is much too little to fight this very complex phenomena. So it's about something which goes beyond our borders. This is a human problem. Migration policy cannot simply rely on controls and reductions of flows of migration, because with that we will increase the illegal migration. Though we will weaken our societies, and the debate has become an emotional one, which is no longer includes much common sense. Illegal migration is the exception of human behavior. Only 3.5% of the world population are migrants. We cannot concentrate on this issue alone, because if we do, we will weaken our societies. And in Europe, we'll weaken ourselves, because the logic is that there's us and there's the others. And that's the logic from the 1930s. And history has shown us that that leads to tragedy. And so we need, more than ever, to have a migration policy, a common European migration policy, which focuses on people and the fundamental founding principles of, respects the founding principles of Europe, so that people who have a right to asylum can get that. We need a legal and a safe regulatory framework in place. We need that this should be orderly, and we need to join the Global Compact for that. So next to Italy.
Grazie.
Thank you. Italy appreciates the vision that Austria has as far as immigration is concerned. And we would like to confirm, like Austria did, that we want to have a very clear control of the external borders of the European Union, because only if we have a proper control of the external borders can we continue to have free circulation of the European citizens within these borders. Without this external control, or the control of the external borders, the European Union, Schengen and everything we built up during these years are threatened. In addition to that, however, we see that the Western Mediterranean route and the Eastern Mediterranean route are not really controlled in the right way. We have 6 billion that was spent for the eastern part, where we had Turkey, but we didn't have the same sort of money spent on the central Mediterranean, where there are only very few measures that are taken to help us. And with the same effort, 6 billion in 4 years, that would have been destined that were destined to the Maghreb and the Libyan authorities. If we had spent that on the eastern or the central part of the Mediterranean, we would have solved the problem there as well. Therefore, the major challenge now is to come up with a policy that would be similar to the policy that we have with Turkey for the northern African countries as well, because otherwise the whole burden of controlling the Mediterranean and migration from there will be borne by Italy and Spain.
Thank you very much. Next, Albania, Nabela. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here, particularly because, in the name of the Albanian Parliament, I would like to thank you for the support that's been extended to us within the framework of European integration. Although, obviously, we hope for more with regard to the Austrian presidency. Albania has done a great deal in this direction along the European road. Albania will not be stopped, and I look for your support along this road, because this is for our future, for this generation, for our young people. They have to have a European perspective. And I would like to emphasize once more that the Albanian regime has worked a great deal towards fighting organized crime in society, but also in judicial reform. We have achieved a great deal, and we expect for more support from you, even more support, because we are convinced that we can make these last few steps towards Brussels. So I thank you very much once again for allowing me to be here today, and I'm very interested to hear what the other participants have to say. Thank you very much. Next, Slovenia. Dari Krajcik. So, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Austria, for organizing this conference. In Slovenia, we consider the issue of migration is a very great challenge both for our member state, but also for the whole of the European Union. It's not simply an external policy issue, it's also an internal policy channel. And I would like to point out that Slovenia has only got 2 million head of population. So this large wave, well, there were about 500,000 migrants moving through our country, and that was a huge logistical challenge, and also a challenge for security and also for the environment. We are now protecting our borders very carefully, very strictly against migratory flow. And now the internal borders in the European Union are a problem for us, concern for us. We think that between Slovenia and Austria, we don't have to have quite the extent of controls on those borders are being carried out. So we would like to see this problem resolved. So we've seen that in the West Balkans, these states are not just members or candidate countries, but they're also an important part of our security system. So I would like to say that I visited Macedonia. The Parliament of the Parliament and I visited Macedonia, and we met with the factions who are working towards for NATO and for the European Union. So I think it's important that we stay strong together. This is a huge challenge for our societies, and we will have to continue to address ourselves to this problem. Thank you very much. Then Ottmar Karas from the European Parliament. So, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to give you my very warm thanks for the excellent cooperation, both at a technical and political level, with the presidency, between the presidency and the European Parliament. So, It must be said that it's too early to say how this will finish by the end of the presidency. We've got 5 weeks left. We have some very important dossiers which could be completed. 26 are priorities within the trialogues. And I would like to say that we would have less trouble in the debate between the national parliaments and European Parliament if we were able to deal with certain principles. So support for the parliamentary liberal democracy, if that was dealt with, because that means that you have to keep to the Charter of Fundamental Rights, you have to keep to the Convention on Human Rights, the European Convention on Human Rights, you have to commit yourself to social market economy, and you have to commit yourself to anti-discrimination. At the moment, we have a dilemma because in many areas, these fundamental principles are being violated, and that is causing a problem for our common positions. Yes, we have to say, yes, this is what we want, because we want to say to our citizens, we want to have our multinational framework in place because we want to tell our citizens what we can do. We want the migration package. Yes, we want to have more fairness in taxation in our societies between small companies and large companies. Yes, we want to have rule of law in place in countries where it's not prevailing. We have to pull on the same rope. And we have to say that parliamentarians are standing on the side of the burghers. Thank you. Next, Spain.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Globalization, competitiveness, economic development and immigration, aims of the Austrian presidency, things I'm sure will continue to work on. There's no greater enemy to economic competitiveness than turning in on oneself and nationalism. When it comes to globalization, it shows in that way we don't make any progress. And it doesn't work if we try to respond to globalization with national responses. We need the right answers. We need to do it at European level. We need to fight against those who, from within and without, try to weaken us, because to weaken the Union means to weaken the development of our citizens. And immigration, well, let me say that, firstly, when we talk about immigration, means meeting European law. Remember Article 100 of the Treaty of Lisbon that says that immigration policies are governed by the principle of solidarity and a fair distribution of responsibility and also financial responsibility. Let me remind all countries that this responsibility for solidarity is a matter for all of us, both when it comes to the checks on our common borders, the Eastern Corridor, or the Strait of Gibraltar River, and reassigning those who have entered the EU legally. It's the responsibility of all of us, and those who break with this responsibility are breaking with the necessary solidarity relating to other policies. So let me ask you, countries like Hungary and Austria, who say they're not going to sign up to the Global Immigration Pact to be signed in Morocco on the 14th of December, that they think over this decision, which weakens a global agreement which, without doubt, will be of benefit also to the European Union. The responsibility today for people who enter via Gibraltar to Spain, or for those immigrants who are in Moria, 9,000 are in a camp which only has capacity for 3,000. That's not the responsibility just of the country concerned, but of all of us. We need to show solidarity. We have abandoned 9,000 people who are cold and hungry, who don't have necessary codes. We need to think about this, because we need to have the necessary agreement with Turkey. So we need to think this one over when it comes to vetoing international agreement like the Global Compact. Let's remember that they will help us to move forward in a way which expresses our shared responsibility and solidarity.
Next, Tibor Bana from Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Ms. State Secretary, dear colleagues. One of the biggest challenges of the 21st century is the illegal mass migration. Right now, Europe is not ready for another huge migration wave. While we try to stop, or at least stem the flow of illegal migration, we have to realize that this issue is tearing the European Union apart. We have to focus on those topics where the majority of the member states could agree, like strengthening our outer border protection and cooperating with third countries on a higher level. We have to re-establish the Schengen borders and put an end to the border control within it in order to rebuild trust among member states. In the meantime, we have to strike harder on smugglers and other criminals who consider illegal migration as a business. Member states and even third countries should implement laws which possibly deter smugglers and human traffickers. We have to come up with long-term plans. Global climate change is one of the main reasons of migration, and we can't stop this phenomenon in just a few years. Reducing emission and dealing with mass migration from third countries are going to be key topics in the coming years. These problems can't be solved by individual countries, and what is more, not by the European Union alone. We have to stand and act together to persuade other states and political forces to take concrete measures forward in both issues. Last but not least, let me congratulate to the Austrian Presidency for its great work and taking concrete measures in the problems, in the issues that I mentioned in my speech. Thank you for your attention.
Danke.
Thank you.
Nächste zu Wort gemeldet, Baroness Lucy Neville-Rolf, UK.
We have the UK next.
Of Lords, and I'm former minister in the Competitiveness Council when I was preparing for the UK presidency that, of course, never happened. But I wanted to congratulate the Austrian presidency today, not only for their welcome and their organisation, but also for the progress on the digital single market. Digitalisation is critical to European competitiveness, especially as Asia grows more strongly. And I'm glad to see, for example, agreement on the Central Digital Access Gate, which will help citizens and business, and progress on everything from robotics to AI and to data. I also welcome the work on climate policy, but this work needs to increase digital methods and the promotion of best practice on everything from heat in housing and workplaces and transport. And we need to invest in battery technology because this will help to even out supply on energy and is critical to energy security. And then finally, thank you for the reference in the COSAC document, paragraph 5.7, to the problem of pollution by plastics. This is, I believe, a great threat to the oceans and indeed to mankind. And indeed, I'm leading a debate on this shortly in our own parliament. It is an important issue at European level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Serbia, Ms. Elvira Kovac.
Thank you. Distinguished Chair, dear colleagues, on behalf of the European Integration Committee of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia, allow me to thank the Austrian Presidency for its engagement in the Western Balkans region and for the support to the EU enlargement. The enlargement policy enshrined in the European integration process has been a driver of reforms in each of the countries in the region and yielded some concrete results. Continuation of the support for the reforms in the Western Balkan countries is of great importance at this moment, and the clear perspective of EU membership is a key factor of stability in the whole region. The role of the EU member state holding the presidency for 6 months is very important for us as the EU candidate country. I would like to emphasize the fact that we heard that for the past 2 months, the Republic of Serbia has been visited by the President of the Republic of Austria, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Austria, as well as the President of the National Council of the Austrian Parliament just a week ago. In this regard, although the accession process is not based only on opening and closing of negotiating chapters, but notably on bringing about a country's transformation into a modern and prosperous society in which the citizens have high living standards along with the rule of law, we hope that by the end of the Austrian presidency, the intergovernmental conference will be held and that new negotiating chapters in the negotiations between the Republic of Serbia and the European Union will be opened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Albania, Ms. Elisa Spiropali.
Thank you. I'm Elisa Spiropali from the Albanian Parliament. I want to give a special thanks to the Austrian Presidency for putting the Western Balkans as one of the chief priorities. The region has proven to be a reliable partner with the solidarity shown during the migration crisis and its continuous contribution. It is clear that the full integration of the Western Balkans is in the economic and security interest of Europe. Albania is committed to showing measurable progress on all of the objective criteria. We have focused on the rule of law, adopting a formidable justice reform, I would say the most radical in the region, with a full vetting process of all judges and prosecutors at all levels. We have worked hard on bilateral and border and security issues, as well as minority rights. We have passed and are now implementing a most progressive minority framework law. We have had recognized process and progress in consolidating institutions, fighting crime and corruption. The progress is visible and clear for all of those who want to see. The Western Balkans are counting on a clear European perspective, and particularly Albania and Macedonia count on a well-deserved opening of negotiations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker from Poland, Mr. Jaroslav Opremski.
Thank you. First of all, we should recollect that yesterday we had a 100th anniversary of independence of Latvia. Congratulations, congratulations to Riga. From Polish side, we wish you prosperity, of course, inside EU and exterior security. All the best. Prezydencja austriacka to niełatwy czas dla Europy.
The Austrian presidency is not an easy time for Europe. All the more so, we are grateful to Austria for having made such progress in the digital market, and we're also grateful for the fact that the integration of the Western Balkans has made progress. I want to point out that if we cannot make progress in the Western Balkans, that's a loss for all of us, and that might lead to a destabilization of the whole continent in future. For Poland, the question of the cohesion budget is very important. We think that there should be as little reduction in this area as possible. If the European Union wants to assume new tasks, then that might be financed from other areas and not from the cohesion fund. As far as we're concerned, progress for subsidiarity is a very important point. And looking at the report on subsidiarity that we had, we saw that there's no major change here. There should be a big debate on this big solution that was suggested here does not really fill the gap between the EU and the citizens and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, allow me to convey my sincere congratulations on your third successful presidency of the European Union. Austria took over the presidency at a very turbulent time for the European Union, and we are grateful that the state, in addition to essential issues such as Brexit, migration, etc., continue to support the Western Balkans' convergence to the European Union. The EU enlargement process is of highest importance for Macedonia. Our commitment to the European integration process is demonstrated by the consensual fulfillment of all priority reforms, the completion of the normative part of the Ohrid Framework Agreement, the agreement of good neighborly relations and cooperation with the Republic of Bulgaria, and the final agreement for the settlement on the name issue with the Republic of Greece and its ratification in the Assembly. In these historic moments for the state, we strongly believe that together with the opposition, we will do the necessary to ensure a prosperous future for our country. Following the successful referendum in the country, the Assembly of the Republic of Macedonia gave the green light for the constitutional changes in accordance with the Prespa agreement, with which one of the main obstacles of the Euro-Atlantic integration has been surpassed. We are aware that with the realization of this agreement, we get another chance, one we must take advantage of, and thus work hard to meet the necessary EU requirements, primarily in the area of judiciary and fundamental rights, justice, and the rule of law, that is chapters 23 and 24. We stay committed to our goals by establishing democratic institutions that will guarantee the rule of law, the independence of the institutions, the equality of all before the law. Awaiting the European elections next spring, we believe that EU's policy regarding further enlargement of the European Union with new member states will continue in the next mandate, and that the announcement made by the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Mr. Hahn, that in 2025 we will become an equal member state of the EU will be realized. In this regard, in the end, I want to express my gratitude to all member states that support the European integration process, since it is in this interest of all in Europe that the Balkans are stable and prosperous and not a hotspot of new crises. In this regard, I believe you could give us
very much.
Even more support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presidency, Romania, Angel Tilva.
Thank you very much. Allow me from the very onset to thank you for the hospitality demonstrated during our presidency. As of the 1st of July 2018, Romania has been following the Austrian presidency and the role it assumed also in relations with the European Parliament, which contributes to the evaluation as realistically as possible to follow all the dossiers which are in work. On the one hand, it is essential that there is a smooth transition between the two trio presidencies and the continuity in managing and obtaining all priorities. Dear friends, I would like to reiterate, Romania is ready, steady and ready to take on the next presidency. We know the results and we appreciate the successes of the Austrian presidency, and in taking over our mandate, we salute all the possibilities in which we can reflect upon our priorities, which are in tune with the European agenda. As far as the security is concerned, we fully support all the legislative proposals which aim to consolidate security, interconnectivity between all the aspects of security, coordinating all the European agencies, Frontex, the European asylum and migration policies, the interconnectivity of SIS, the Schengen information, and the coordination of the activities of all agencies. As far as migration is concerned, the way in which the Austrian presidency has managed such dossiers and tied to ensuring the security of the external border, the countries where returning can be ensured is all in full line, and especially taking into consideration of the special sensitivities and aspects of a common migration policy in the EU. As far as social security is concerned, mobile Romanian workers, of course, represent the main interest of Romania, and we are keeping a watchful eye on how this is treated and how social security is guaranteed in the interest of member states, so that also child allocations can be paid. And if we add to all of this cohesion and subsidiarity, we will today present to you our priorities during the Romanian presidency. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Sì, buongiorno, ringrazio la Presidenza. Il tema sul quale volevo concentrare questo breve intervento è quello legato alla problematica dell'immigrazione. È uno dei temi su cui si è concentrata la Presidenza austriaca, ma i cui risultati sono ancora oggi purtroppo insoddisfacenti. Ricordo a tutta la platea che noi abbiamo un articolo, l'articolo 80 del Trattato sul funzionamento dell'Unione Europea, che impone solidarietà ed equa ripartizione delle responsabilità nella gestione del fenomeno migratorio. Un articolo che troppo spesso è dimenticato dagli Stati membri e dalle istituzioni europee. Allora vogliamo davvero affrontare, risolvere e gestire in modo serio e responsabile questo tema. Dobbiamo, credo, mettere un maggiore impegno per uno slancio più forte nel quadro finanziario pluriennale. Le risorse che attualmente sono destinate alla gestione di questa problematica sono insoddisfacenti, come ha rilevato lo stesso commissario Avramopoulos. Io credo che noi dobbiamo concentrarci su alcuni punti chiave. Uno, mettere maggiori risorse sull'Africa Plan. Due, ragionare su davvero una guardia di frontiera europea che abbia maggiori mezzi e risorse a disposizione. 3, lavorare per realizzare davvero, smetterla con le parole, gli hotspot per la prima accoglienza gestiti dall'Unione Europea con risorse e mezzi europei, e un impegno forte dell'Unione dal punto di vista sia politico che economico per il rimpatrio di migranti che non hanno diritto a una protezione internazionale allo status di rifugiato. C'è poi il tema della riforma del sistema d'asilo, che è il tema centrale della problematica in oggetto. Noi dobbiamo lavorare per instaurare canali legali di attraversamento e di arrivo delle persone che hanno diritto alla protezione internazionale e l'Unione Europea. E dobbiamo a questo punto, da questo punto di vista, superare la riforma di Dublino. Io non trovo non condivisibile l'idea di una riforma all'unanimità. Abbiamo un trattato che prescrive la maggioranza per il superamento di questo regolamento. Dobbiamo continuare a lavorare su questo tema. Infine, nel frattempo non possiamo dimenticare l'obbligo di una ridistribuzione dei richiedenti asilo imposto da 2 decisioni del 2015 che sono ancora vincolanti per l'Unione Europea. Quando sento parlare alcuni colleghi di altri paesi, penso a quelli che orgogliosamente si sono definiti l'asse di Visegrad, di una mancata disponibilità a rispettare queste decisioni, io mi domando allora qual è il senso dell'integrazione europea. Se non facciamo rispettare lo Stato di diritto in Europa, viene davvero meno il senso dell'appartenenza al progetto di integrazione europea. L'Europa vuol dire diritti e doveri, ma anche non solo opportunità, anche responsabilità. È necessario davvero che da questi incontri parta una nuova esigenza, un rinnovato appello a far rispettare decisioni che sono vincolanti e obbligatorie per tutti gli Stati membri, altrimenti davvero non riusciremo a risolvere questa problematica.
Schweden, Abgeordneter Jens Holm.
Vielen Dank. Jag vill särskilt tacka mycket för det tidigare anförandet från Mr. De Luca från
Italy, and I do agree with much of what he said. And I would also like to talk about migration. We're now talking about a migration crisis globally with close to 70 million individuals who are refugees. But it's rather about, I would say, a political crisis, that we do not take our responsibility for helping
these people who are fleeing. And we know that most of those individuals who do flee, they become refugees in a poor country. They never reach the borders of Europe. They reach Lebanon, Albania, Turkey, for example. And that is why I feel concerned when reading and hearing what the Austrian chairmanship is now saying. And I think that this is too much of a one-sided focus on keeping people away from the European borders. Here's talk about illegal refugees. And I want to stress the fact that no human being is illegal. And this is a human right to try to seek a safe haven somewhere else in the world. And what we see today is that the EU has agreed on a terrible agreement with Turkey, where we no longer criticize Turkey when President Erdogan is throwing members of the opposition into jail and closing newspapers, etc. We also heard from Caroline Stadler that Egypt might be a new partner to collaborate with. And, Chair, we can change this. We need a compulsory, mandatory redistribution system in the EU, and we need legal ways into the EU. We need to stop weapons export, and we need to work against climate change, because this is something that has an impact on refugee streams, and we need to cancel the agreement with Turkey. We have our basic values: democracy, human rights, freedom, and we also have Article 80 that talks about solidarity, and we now have to have a humane, safe refugee policy. It's time.
Next statement, please.
Suur aitäh Austria eesistujale töö eest, väga kaitsev õhtusöök oli ja mul on alati hea Austrias olla, tunnete kui ennast nagu kodus.
Kui paljud riigid on siin täna kritiseerinud teid, et te ei ole teinud piisavalt, many countries have criticized you today that you haven't done enough, that you have abandoned the UN migration compact, that you have not imposed compulsory redistribution schemes. I'm the one who would actually praise you. I'm very happy to see that Austria is a presidency country that decides things independently. And the same goes for the UN Migration Compact. On the same basis, the United States, Australia, several other member states have refused to go along with this compact. And I'm happy to say that the Estonian government now has decided not to go along as well. The arguments that the critics say is that it is not binding, and at the same time it's strange to see how Austria is fiercely criticized for not joining it. But independence is also an important principle, and you are a very good example of this. At the same time, I would like to call on colleagues from other countries to be calm. The colleagues who talk about compulsory redistribution, compulsory quotas, and saving the world. Actually, our next topic today is Brexit. Let us try to understand the real reasons for Brexit. What was the real reason why millions of people in the UK said they want to get out of the EU? If we are emphasizing today that we have to force countries to accept the quota systems, to accept solidarity, which no one has ever properly defined, then actually it is a problem, and that is the reason why governments in many EU states have changed as well. So thank you very much, Austria, for the good work and the good example you set to other countries. Thank you.
Thank you. We still have two comments. First of all, the delegation of the Netherlands, and then Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor, and of course, thanks to the Austrian organization for organizing this wonderful meeting and the evening yesterday at the Raadhuis. I kindly take the opportunity to introduce myself as the new chair of the Dutch delegation, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Mr. Malik Asmani, my predecessor, for the good cooperation we had together the last years. My delegation, the Dutch delegation, is very grateful to the organization to give the possibility, the opportunity to discuss tomorrow the important subject of the transparency And finally, I would like to make some promotion, if I'm allowed, because together with Belgium and Luxembourg, colleagues of mine are organizing a very important topic at the UN Climate Change Conference at Katowice in Poland, 12th of December, about the EU climate ambition. We've got some information with us, so everybody who is interested is invited to take it with him or her back home. Thank you.
Thank you. Turkey.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Je passe bonjour à tout le monde,
First of all, I would like to wish a good day to everybody, to all the colleagues and all the parliamentarians. So far, we've listened to quite a number of people on the subject that I see people talked about most, namely migration. Mr. Jansson from Sweden said that there's a commitment and an agreement that Europe has with Turkey. It was signed quite a while ago and contains quite a big budget. Now, first of all, for all of those who might know this, when you're thinking about Turkey, just think about the migrants you have, but we have more than 3 million migrants in Turkey, and there are still more and more coming. We have only 3 million Syrians who are in Turkey at the moment, not even mentioning all the others. We're the ones who have to help them, we're the ones who have to feed them, we're the ones who have to pay for the hospitals, for their studies, for schools, etc., etc. So, when you're talking about migration, please don't forget these facts. But you know perfectly well that for the last year and a half, we have had the possibility of traveling as Turks to Europe without a visa. And there's talk about not allowing this anymore. That was an agreement that we reached a year and a half ago, and it hasn't really been implemented fully when you're talking about migration. Just think about the people that you have and the people that we have, and then you can talk about this in full knowledge of the facts. Thank you very much. We had 36 speakers so far, and I would like to ask the State Secretary to give a brief reply. Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, it was quite clear. You said make it short. That's very difficult. Given the many comments we had. But first of all, I would like to thank everybody who took the floor for the comments that they made. It's very important that in our discussion we can voice our views, that we continue to discuss this, and I can say that 6 months are both very long but also very short. If I look back, I can say that I can't even believe that we only have 5 weeks of EU presidency left, and if you consider that there's Christmas in between, it's only 35 days. On the other hand, the time seems to be very long because so far it has been a very intensive and very difficult time with lots of work, and that will certainly continue to be the case. Thank you for all of those who have praised us. It's very good to have motivating things said to you before you're nearly at the end of your efforts, and I can only confirm that I will hand on this praise to all those who have contributed to making the organization and the work that we had here so easy. Now, let me very briefly deal with the different points that were made. As I summarized this, it was mainly the points that I mentioned at the beginning of my introductory statement. On migration, I think we don't have any other choice but to find a solution here. And listening to the comments, it became quite clear that it's not just between the parliamentarians of the various countries that we have different views. We saw that in one single country there were different views within the country as well. The fact is that in June the European Council had a change, that they had agreed that there should be consensus for these questions, and I think that that is the necessary way to make progress here and to make sure that in the countries we will have a good implementation of the system, consensus. But I would like to mention again and stress this, that especially for this big question of migration, we have to find a consensus. We have to come up with a joint position. And I would say that we are trying this again with our tour of the capitals, and we hope very much that we will be able to achieve a compromise. Very briefly, the migration pact was mentioned a number of times. I would like to say quite clearly that that is not some decision that Austria took as the presidency of the EU Council. We took this decision as a sovereign member state, and therefore the discussion why Austria and why here and now is a discussion that I don't want to continue here. I'm here as a representative of the European Council, of the European Presidency of the Council, but not as somebody who's supposed to make clear what our national position is. But as Bundesrat Stemmer said, it is not just yesterday or today that we have discussions. I was in the European Parliament with many of those who are here today when the subject was raised in Strasbourg at the European Parliament last week. Next big subject, multi-annual financial framework. The essential thing is that here we take the concrete steps to fix the concrete aims we want to have for the next 7 years. We think that the decision should be taken as quickly as possible, and this was mentioned by a colleague of the UK as well, that the UK will not stay within the Union. So that's another reason why we must not lose time, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to make the greatest possible progress here. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have to remain realistic. It will probably not be possible to come to a conclusion during the Austrian presidency. We just want to make the best preparatory work for the Romanian presidency. Digital tax, that's another word that was mentioned here repeatedly, and I'd like to take that on board as well. Obviously, digital tax is not supposed to be something that will slow down progress, and you're quite right that we have to do more here, but there has to be more justice in this area as well. Digitalization brings enormous progress and enormous advantages, and there are many things which have become part of our daily life which we cannot even think didn't exist always. But it also has certain risks and certain dangers, and therefore it is necessary to create justice in this area as well, and that is why we would like very much to come up with a joint position on that as well. Western Balkans, thank you to all of those who made positive comments here. I have to say quite clearly that the project of Europe will not be concluded as long as the states from the Western Balkan and other parts of Europe have not become members and have not been able to see things the way we do. They need a perspective, they need the prospect of becoming members, and that is what we will strive at. Quite a lot of things have been said as far as Brexit is concerned. I can only stress again that we all want to avoid hard Brexit. Then one subject where there was a concrete question, subsidiarity. I have to say that Austria will certainly try to come up with a 12-week time limit when statements have to be made on the basis of the European proposals, and the European Commission wants to be flexible here as well, so that's the 8-week stand. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we'll understand that I can't give a reply to all questions. I was told to be very brief. I hope that I managed to do that. Thank you very much. I take it that we'll meet again, and we'll certainly come to meetings in Brussels in the next couple of weeks where we can talk there. And now I hope that you'll have a nice day in Vienna. Thank you.